when they impacted the Roman Empire, they took on Christianity, particularly Germany. See, they're picking up where they go along. So they're picking up Christianity, which is a theoretical philosophy of living. See, at this time, people are living spiritually. That's why the Pope was so important. We live secular now. We have presidents, prime ministers, but at one time, the world leaders were spiritual leaders, starting with the first example, the Pharaoh. That's where all of them got the example. There was divine leadership. What's happening here is they are taking on this misguided understanding from the Europeans who didn't understand the Romans. The Romans didn't understand the Greeks, and the Greeks didn't understand anything that the Kemites were telling them, with exception. So they are now developing this fanatical religious ethic that is no longer that there is a one true loving God, but it's my God. It's an angry and jealous God. It's a God that if you act up, you in hell. They come down and they bring these concepts down with them, which is now going to set up this next map. Looks at the expansion of Islam. Mecca, Medina. Okay. If we are from Puerto Rico and our name is Medina, know where that word came from. That's not a Spanish word. In fact, you know, Spanish don't really have a language when you look at it. It's based in the Latin language, but it is so flavored. The great majority, you know, the great majority of the constellations are in the Afrab language. Most of the constellations, and that's because they learned astronomy through the Moors, not the Arabs. Not the people we see over in Persia today. Look, if these people had knowledge of astronomy, why don't they have things set up like in Africa? They got the ziggurat, which is in the Mesopotamia, right here. They got the ziggurat, which is a step pyramid, but that's so clearly African. Built at a time when Africans were moving over. You couldn't give credit for it to anybody but Africans because there's nothing necessarily happening here. You have Africans flowing across here, constantly bringing new ideas. By the time the Pyramid Age came in, that's another thing they brought in. They say that it happened simultaneously, but if it did, why does Africa have so many pyramids and there's only one there? I need help here. I need you to explain to me common sense. Walk me through this so that I can understand this. What they do is they give you any old answer, and they expect you to accept it. And anything else, you'll be punished for if you ask. And the bottom line is that is a miracle. And then you can't even ask that, because a miracle you can't question. When you look at Islam, the very tenets of Islam are deeply rooted in the African tradition, particularly in Ethiopia, where the Prophet Muhammad, blessings on that brother's name, sent Bilal. Remember? When he's ready to, he gets expelled from Mecca. Okay? So what he does, he returns to Medina to get his program together. He dispatches his second adopted son, of African descent, by the way. His first adopted son was African too. And by the way, the big breakup in Islam, when the Prophet died, was over color. That's why it broke up. It broke up along color lines. And those that would be the Moors kept to the Prophet Muhammad's teachings, not to his writings, because the Quran wasn't written at this time. It came after. So what's happening here is that you have the Prophet here in Medina ready to go into Mecca. Bilal is here. When he's ready to go over, he calls back forward Bilal to come back. Bilal comes back, but he comes back with thousands of Ethiopian soldiers. These soldiers have a fundamental faith system, and this faith system is what you see being born in this part of the world. And then you have Antara, who comes and gives it its linguistical flavor language, its grammatical structure is brought here. If it was from here, you would see evidence of it here. You don't see evidence of it here. This is my challenge to anyone that would look at this. Where do you see the development of this kind of civilization? Here. But what do you see happening here is the first place that the followers of the Prophet, blessings on that brother's name, go is into Egypt. And that's where they get further information of the Kemetic legacy, of the ancient world's knowledge, the deciphering and the understanding of the text written in Africa. But the Saddam Husseins and the Muammar Gaddafis do not exist at this time. They come later. But the original peoples that would come to this part of the world when you look at the African presence in early Asia, and you look at that piece on Saudi Arabia alone, you see rock carvings of African heads. Just like you see the African heads in Kemet, you see the African heads in America, you see African heads everywhere. You see the African heads in Saudi Arabia up on mountains that are African. And all you got to do is go to the book, The African Presence in Early Asia, edited by Ivan van Sertima, and there's a chapter that he'll show you what these heads look like. And there's no doubt that these are African folks. So the very fundamental principles of Islam come out of an African mindset. And Islam is merely a combination of the very best of what was considered to be in the Jewish faith and the very best of the Christian faith. And when you see the development of early Islam with the Rabs, and then you get the Rabbi, which is Ra-Ba, Ra being the energy of the sun and Ba being the essence or the spirit, the breath, you can see Ra-Ba is the mother language of where Rabbi and the Muslim Rab would come from. Rabs are like nichers in Islam. I didn't learn that until a sister from Senegal came to Kumbalamba with Charles Finch. They were breaking down Islam from an African perspective that I had never even heard of sometime before. It's very deep. But you see, when other people take on what we got, and then they put their own thing to it. See, one of the biggest problems that the two groups of Moors had in Spain, one of the big, now there were a couple of others, but the lighter complexion, or what would be called the Afrabs, had against their darker complexion Muslim brothers and sisters, was the role that women played in Spain. Because women could rule. Women could own land. They were free. And so that when these others from Persia or any of these other areas would come to this celebrated place, they would, how can you let your woman walk with you? They say, we don't ask our women to walk behind us. That has nothing to do with our belief system. So you can see that when they took their mindset of that patriarchal system, they superimposed it over Africa, just like the Europeans did to Christianity and to every other faith system. They would diminish the role of women. In Africa, there was a clear understanding of the duality, the twinness of the human family. Sure. And that there's no one above the other. It's only through intellect and consciousness that you could even be above someone else. So when we look at the first map, which looks at the Christianity, and then the second map deals of the 4th century, then the 5th century, where you see these individuals coming down, destroying this area, ransacking all of Europe, southern Europe, Spain, Italy, all this area. And now what's happening, they try to get up into the northern parts of Africa, and that's when you see a movement of people. And you see what they got here like this? You see the movement. This is the natural way in which it went. And if you look at development, you'll see a University of Timbuktu here, but you're not going to see any mighty university anyplace else. I once asked a professor of mine, how could Eurasians, which is what he was depicting Muslims to be, how could they have come to Timbuktu in a land they didn't know, take up all of their different flora and fauna and develop an entire educational system around them so quickly? He said he didn't know how it happened. All he knows is that's what it said in the book. Now, with that kind of response, you can understand why we're in the predicament that we're in. Okay? I mean, because he didn't even have the evidence, and he was just saying it's in the book. Put in what's in the book.
Before you take it down, you said, now I'm trying to remember the map, those other guys were coming from the Goths, Ostrogoths.
Ostrogoths, yes.
Yeah, they come down here.
Yes.
And like coming to Brooklyn, say. And they come in, and the Ostrogoths are coming over this side.
Ostrogoths are coming, they're all coming out of this.
They're cold and they're hungry.
Yes.
Right, okay, so they're coming down here. And so this is sort of like an interception?
For those groups in particular, because there are other people coming from all this northern area of the 51st parallel. We are focusing on these people here because of the movement of peoples into this part of the world.
Right, then you don't really want them to come in because they don't know how to act. I'm just saying.
Are you talking about in terms of African people?
These African people moving,
yes.
Like they're moving out of there and taking their African people, taking what we know with us. But also before you said that one of the reasons that they were moving out and moving up is because of these really vandals and,
yes.
and barbaric type people were coming down and destroying the place.
Yes.
So it's like attack and counterattack?
Yes, it's like if a snowball was coming down a hill, what you might want to do, instead of meeting it directly,